Boom. All right, cool. Big Dave, thanks for being here. So, everyone who's tuning in for this one, we've got Dave here. Dave is a psychologist in Newcastle, and he's a mate of mine, and we've known each other for a long time. And we've got him in today, and we're going to be talking about some of the things that bring people into his office, and hopefully some alternatives or ways that people can go about their situation. And we definitely want to go over some things about reducing the stigma that it takes to go and see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I think a lot of people put people like that on a pedestal, and it creates an environment in which people can start to feel down if they go and talk to like a professional for mental health and that sort of stuff. So what, Dave, what are some of the most common causes, firstly, for people that come and see you?
Well, I primarily work with sort of anxiety and depression. My focus area is more in the adolescent to sort of early 20s age bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily mainly with males as well. That just tends to be the focal point of my referrals, just due to the limited amount of male therapists, and then the need for male individuals to seek, that would preference to seek a male therapist. And then that then stems into a lot of aggression work as well. Anger management as well as being often a secondary emotion to maybe the depression or anxiety that might be the primary emotion that they might be feeling. That seems to be the bulk of my referrals.
So I think when people sort of come to you, are they reluctant at first? Is it hard for them to open up?
Yeah, usually I just start off by asking them how they're going and how they're feeling coming today. Some are pretty cruisy, some have seen 10 before, some have seen 5 before, and some might be their first time. Some are embarrassed, some are excited. I guess there's just a whole variety of ways that people react to seeing someone. Some enjoy the attention, some people really dread it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just about breaking down the boundaries to begin with, and really sort of speaking genuinely about what they want to get from therapy and what are some of the things that are concerning them. Really put the focus back on them and really what they want to receive by seeing me, not to take it away from me heavily handed trying to control and direct things, to really get from the sort of understand from the get-go what are their sort of concerns, whether that be managing them or even sometimes identifying them. A lot of people coming in with anxiety and depression often don't have the insights into sort of identifying what are the causes for that for them, what are the sort of precipitating environmental factors that might be contributing to them feeling that way. And sometimes it's a matter of just sort of highlighting or alluding to them what are their difficulties, or more per se, maybe what is contributing primarily to how they're feeling.
Like you're talking what age groups?
So I'm primarily work with adolescents, so that's 13 and up.
Yeah.
So if I'm working with any ages younger than that, that's typically with the parents. That's not to say that there are many other individuals younger than age that are receiving help.
So you'd be talking to a lot of people that are still in school.
Yeah, quite a lot.
And what are some of the signs and that sort of stuff that people might benefit from talking with a psychologist?
Well, I guess from my point of view, it really varies because it depends on the family dynamic. So particularly if you're working with adolescents, I guess, when you're in that sort of vulnerable age of 13 and up, there is obviously a parent or guardian involved in some form.
Yeah.
Sometimes not, and sometimes that support doesn't look good, and that's part of the concern or the issue, and it can be sometimes systemic throughout the family. That's often the case. However,
Keep talking.
it depends on whether the parent, depends on their role within the family, I guess. Sometimes parents bring them to the first session and play a heavy role within the therapeutic process, and some don't. Some don't want to, some want to. Some ring me up every couple of days asking what's going on, and some want to be regularly updated. I guess for them, the key signs are often avoidant or withdrawn kind of behaviours, and when they see their teenager often start to become isolated or avoidant of things that they typically wouldn't be, whether that be academic sides of things, so maybe withdrawing from school attendance, or avoidant behaviour around attending classes, isolation from their peers, deflecting sort of social sort of interactions and parties, or whether that even be on a lower level, just seeing their friends in general. I think that's probably one of the I guess the distinctions between adolescence and then sort of maybe our age bracket. I guess with that sort of school range, there's often supports around them that are there to identify and maybe raise alarm for when they start seeing a difference in those behaviours and seeing a transformation in maybe a decline in their behaviours or aggression. And I think that the key is that there they have that support. But however, when you often see individuals start breaching into the upper echelons of the age bracket that I work with, then you have individuals who are maybe less sort of supported or less connected to the supports around them, or community or family or socially. Because once school breaks down, or even if school broke down early for them, if they were in year 10, etc., and they left, those connections really deteriorate quite quickly, because you really only have your close-knit supported group of friends, if they had any friends at school, or if they only had maybe one or two friends. That support was all there. That's all they had there. And then once that's gone, around that construct of school that really encouraged that sort of support, then it's really difficult for sometimes these individuals to become self-aware about when they are starting to deteriorate, because I think the red flags often are more around sort of regression, around avoidant or withdrawal behaviours, and that's really helpful, or it's very easy for parents to pick up on that, as opposed to possibly say you and I, who are, it's quite easily for us to deflect our social interactions with our friends or family. We can always make excuses up quite easily. Everyone's really busy.
No one really knows.
Yeah, and I guess your friend has to be very persistent about seeing you and really be aware or on top of the flags if they start to identify that you really wouldn't typically you're not doing things that you typically would have in the past, or you're avoidant or deflecting sort of invitations to do things that is out of character of you. Or sometimes maybe there might be sort of more alarming behaviours like aggression or very severe isolation withdrawal that might raise flags
and that's something that's probably extremely hard to identify, especially people for you're in my age, because you don't know. Like you don't know if someone went to a birthday or they had something on or that weekend, that sort of stuff. With like warning signs for depression, then what are the key things, like especially if you have parents bringing in children, like if we can start on that, what are some of the signs parents should be looking out for with their kids that might be doing it?
I think just to keep it basic, it's more around sort of you're going to see a decline in someone's mood. You're going to see symptoms like being more withdrawn, flat mood, lack of energy and motivation, possibly lack of appetite, disturbances with sleep. I think that the key for me is
Can I stay on that for a sec? When you say lack of disturbances with sleep, it's a common trait too with depression to always be in bed. So that's like, can you like, I want someone to understand that always being in bed isn't you're always tired.
Yeah, so always being in bed is just avoidance sometimes of life, really. Like the bed is the safe zone, and that allows you to be protected in whatever way that looks like within your life from, I guess, the things that you're trying to avoid, the things you're finding challenging. That could be work, family relationships, just outside in general, those challenges that are involved in that, and that can be a result of a steady decline in your own presentation and mental health. Lack of motivation to get out of bed is usually associated with that, but that could also stem from lack of sleep or disturbances during sleep affecting your sort of energy or motivation then to engage with your day or typical activities. I think that's the most important part.
And then
they're the most important pickups anyway, I think.
Yeah. So
that looks very different for everyone, right?
Yeah, that's what's hard. But you know, if people have sort of some telltale signs, because we'll go if we move forward from that, then like if we're moving up in age brackets, how do people ask their friends if they're depressed? Because like,
well, I think that is. I don't think that they should put that onus on their friend, because the friend's not going to know. I think that the most important bit is that they're able to then sort of alert their friend that they're not feeling okay. Right?
My question was more orientated the other way. Like,
as a friend,
if I see, if I notice Dave's not coming out anymore, you know, how do you challenge that, but in a non
confrontational way?
Yeah,
I think the best way to do that is by throwing out a message just sometimes and just sort of saying, hey, how you been? Haven't seen you around for a bit, just checking to see you're doing okay. Now, sometimes people may be reluctant to do that, but there's no harm can be done from that message, right? And if it starts a conversation, then it was completely worth it. And if they're fine, well then they're fine.
Yeah.
Like, that's great.
The hard thing is though, and the only reason I ask these questions now is I make a point of asking people, how's your headspace? How are you mentally?
Yep.
Because asking someone that, they're like it's not a day-to-day question. How you
Well, it's
going?
not. No one really asks someone
And
how they're going.
How's your headspace? And
Yeah.
people go, how is my headspace?
Well, some people aren't asking themselves that question.
That's what I mean. That's why I've always challenged it in a different way and gone like, how are you now? Because I know I've sat there in my most depressed states and people have rang me, how are you? And I can wipe the tears away and go, I'm good.
Well, often it's an incremental decline in how someone's feeling, right? So it's not like you drop from here to here unless it's a sort of traumatic event
experience.
And that then has its own complications associated with that. But if it's a very transcendent sort of decline into how someone's feeling, then they might not be aware themselves because it's a very sort of slow, subliminal sometimes sort of decline. And then other people that haven't seen someone for a month or two, you can pick it up on it pretty quickly when you see someone, haven't seen them for 6 months or 3 months, and you can pick up on whereas they may not even have the self-awareness. So I think sometimes bringing light to that or alluding to that fact with someone and starting that conversation is sometimes helpful.
That's a really great point because you always notice it over a long period of time, but it's very hard to notice day to day. And I think that's why in a household, even parents and partners and that sort of stuff can miss it. Like you can walk in and be like, what's going on here?
Yep.
And people in that house will have no clue about it, and it's really hard to challenge it. That's why a constructive but different way to ask someone, how's your mental space, is so one of the best ways to ask someone if you think they are depressed that I've ever heard was the words they used was like how are you feeling? Like someone in a similar circumstance to you may be depressed or may be suicidal. And it takes you out of the situation. It takes the person out of the situation. Now you're talking about a third person, and people will much more often feel okay talking about a third person who's not really here. Like, they're really inclined to say yes to that sort of question.
I think sometimes also just drawing out the evidence for the person. So I see that you haven't been coming to work as much, or I see you've been declining my request to come hang out, or I see that you haven't been here as often as what I may have thought. Just checking in to see you're okay, or just check to see everything at home is doing fine. I think that allows them to see that you feel comfortable asking the question, right? It's like if someone is really having sort of severe suicidal ideation, if you show any discomfort about asking that kind of question, then they are going to withdraw in response to that. But if you were assertive around it and you say that I'm confident to talk to you about this, I might not have the skills to help you, but I'm here to talk to you about it and I feel comfortable talking to you about it. It allows the other individual to feel that they're comfortable to talk to you as well.
That's a fucking really great point because I haven't thought about it like that either.
If you don't ask the question whether they're having suicidal thoughts, they're not going to tell you.
And you can't, that's not a light conversation.
No.
And if you're that's actually made me think about that a lot because I can talk about it, you can talk about it very confidently, but if it wasn't a you or me situation, or it was me 3 years ago when I was in that mental state and someone was like, not thinking about killing yourself, are you?
Exactly. And they're not going to say yes if you have that response.
If you're like, you're not going to do
don't
that.
drop anything on me now.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
That's what you're saying, really. Yeah.
That's exactly what it's like.
I'm here to help you, but don't drop that on me.
As long as it's not too big. And you're like, well, no, I'm good. It's like fucking Jesus,
the ship just sailed there.
Yeah, man, you just blew it.
Big time.
You just blew it.
Good that you tried, but you blew it.
Yes, that's exactly right, and that's what Ben spoke about too. He said the Are You OK course that he's done is about teaching people how to talk, because exactly that, he said, it's all well and good to ask, are you okay? But do you know what to say next if they say no?
Yeah. That's the big question.
Because if you ask your friend, I've been thinking about
sometimes
myself.
It's just like listening. That's obviously a different scenario when someone's having suicidal thoughts. However, sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it's just sort of understanding that they're having hardships or difficulties in their situation. Sometimes it's maybe guidance, sometimes it's direction, sometimes it's maybe telling someone else who you know can support that person and asking permission from that person to be able to get that person involved.
What are signs people can see in themselves, or what's like a wake-up call for someone to go, I need to start, prioritising my mental health?
So I think when it's around anxiety, it's primarily around avoidant behaviour. So it's sort of either self-talk through yourself, saying I don't need to do this anymore, or really sort of talking yourself out of doing things that you typically would have done, like rationalising not going to a party, rationalising not seeing a family, rationalising not seeing a friend or catching up for their birthday, making up excuses in your own head as to why I don't have to go there. I think that's really hard to do because you're able to rationalise really well for yourself, because you can always find excuses up for yourself to be able to say, well, here's a reason for that, and here's a reason for that, I'm too tired, I'm too busy, or I've had a big week, but then that's really hard to be. You have to be really good at your self-awareness to be able to pick up on that. And I think often what the case is that if you are feeling very anxious or depressed, that you are very avoidant of even being aware of those kinds of things and deflecting them. And the motivation.
Yeah, because you're pushing it aside as you build on it.
Yeah, so the avoidant behaviour is there to begin with around things you don't want to do, and then that is sort of even heightened when it's something that's really might expose that anxiety, right, in a social setting, or you might have to actually catch up with people, and you might actually have to face the fear that you are quite concerned about.
I think that, and this is something that I can identify. I definitely did. I started avoiding everything, and then I started not just avoiding situations, but if I had a period where I didn't want to talk to anyone, or I had bad anxiety or depression, I didn't want to go and even see my friends, like the people that I felt comfortable with, because if they asked me where you been, you had to justify those sorts of things, and it throws you right back in the midst of it. And I think it's really hard for people to. What do you do then? You face it in one way or the other. You have to.
I guess that's the biggest concern, because it only really gets to a point then where people have to face it, and usually that's as a result of severe or profound or catastrophic events that have occurred that end up sort of being the ultimate wake-up call for someone having to make a change in their life. And that then there is the substance of the motivation for having to make change. And sometimes that's the trigger. And I think sometimes it's trying to find that balance between what's severe enough for something to happen to someone without being too damaging, but to be enough for them to say, well, hey, I need to go speak to someone about that.
Do you have any answers for that?
I think the answer is just once you start picking up on early signs of withdrawal or avoidant behaviour to things that you would typically not avoid or withdraw, I think just starting the conversation is the key. So that's the sort of step one. It doesn't have to be with a professional. I think it just has to be with a friend or family member that you trust. Yeah. I don't think also you need to expect anything in response from them. I think it's more of a thing for you. Yeah. It's also about setting out a bit of a red flag to that individual so that you're saying, well, hey, I'm not doing so great, or this hasn't been going so well for me lately. Just letting them know. I think that then sort of brings awareness to that person. I think that's really good to start opening up those avenues of communication with people that you trust. That's a good step. I think seeing a psychologist is not always the ideal situation for seeing someone. You have to talk to a complete stranger, and I think that often the case is that people think that seeing a psychologist is going to work straight away, and that's going to solve the concerns, and also that it's going to be a good experience or a positive experience. Often it's maybe not, because you may you have to speak to someone that you don't know, and if you don't really bond or connect with that person, then I think you should not fear about having to go see someone else as well, and having an open conversation about that. Yeah. And I think that's really important to note, is you're not going to connect with someone straight away, and you may have sort of conflicting belief systems to this person, or strategies or sort of theoretical frameworks to approaching things, and that's all right too, because you don't always gel with your doctor, you don't always gel with any kind of professional help, and the same applies to psychologists.
What is it, like when people come in, what are their expectations of you?
I think that's really dependent on what their concerns are. I think that for me, I always elicit that to begin with, so that way we have a structured framework about working towards that goal. So setting like common goals between each other, and that can not always be in a therapeutic setting. That can be generally in their life, right? So someone's trying to progress at work, or someone's trying to have more sort of connected relationships with people around them. Then I guess that's an end goal, whereas they are trying to maybe manage their anxiety in social situations. That's working towards that goal, and that's a pathway to working towards the goal of having more fruitful relationships possibly. So obviously that's the goal. The concern is that they're having difficulties building healthy relationships and maintaining healthy relationships. So let's find the cause of the problem there. So I think that having clear communication around your goals and how that can be approached in a therapeutic framework from the beginning will give you good insight to the clinician understanding what your needs are. So I think that's really important, because sometimes assumptions can be made from both parties about, well, what's the right thing to do and what's really the concern here. So I think getting that insight from them really allows you to see, well, yes, they've heard me this session, so they have the ability to have insight to what my concerns were, and we've set a goal here, and they're able to demonstrate that they have a structured and concrete framework to achieve that goal. So that gives you some kind of self-assurance that you're on the right track, or they're on the right track to help you.
That's a great point. Do you have a sort of framework around what you sort of identify as a mental health plan?
Well, that all depends on the doc, because the doc will assess through their psychological assessments. They're usually quite quick, take 5 minutes or so on their behalf, and that's due to purely from their preference what they decide to choose. It could be a K10 or it could be a DAS-21, which really measures sort of depression, anxiety, and stress, and primarily works
they
on
just
symptoms.
like the questionnaires that they do.
Yeah, and everyone can access them from the internet.
Yeah.
So they're online.
They're
on
online
and
pages
available,
and that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and there's
I've
even
seen them.
online ones you fill out, and they can give you
readings
and feedback on different sort of areas or episodes.
I'm glad you said that, because I've done them before and I didn't trust it.
Yeah, no, they're trustful.
Purely because
Yeah.
I thought, where is this information?
Nah,
Because I didn't
yeah.
have anything to connect it to. But now
The
that you say that,
DAS-21, the DAS-21, if you pump that into Google, or the K10, they're all reliable tools for those kinds of psychometric
and
testing.
are they age bracketed, or is that a general thing?
No, they're a general thing, usually from about the age of 15 or up or so,
Yeah.
dependent on the assessment really, but they're not based on age-based norms, they're all sort of more based on symptomology.
Yeah. And so if you have anyone come in and you think, well, I don't need to see this person, what are the things you sort of give them to take out of it, or who do you send them to? Or
Well, I think that for them to get a referral through a mental health care plan to see me, often there are genuine concerns, unless they've tricked the doc, which can happen as well. But I think that typically I haven't really come across many cases where I feel like they haven't needed some sort of support psychologically in some way. Sometimes they're not as bad as what they may be alluding to or may feel. Now, obviously, you may say, well, how do you know? How can you make a decision around that? But often, some of these events can be catastrophizing or sensationalizing the effect that they're having on their life, and a lot of the part of it is trying to restructure their cognitive thinking around those events. And often, anxiety-related events are typically catastrophic sort of thinking lines, dependent on the individual's past history and trauma, of course. So that's not ignoring that at all. But I think just sometimes providing guidance and maybe a values-based, goal-orientated approach to what they're doing. So helping them provide some kind of... So again, then it goes back to their goals, right? So that if you feel like there is sort of a bit of a buffer there where you're not quite sure, then getting their goals from them, what they will sort of really want to be working towards, then you can at least create some kind of consistent framework to achieve their goal. So regardless of whether their psychological support is really required or not, to what extent, I guess, could change over time. And I think that even if the support is minimal, if they still want to work towards and committed to working towards a goal, then hey, I think that at least gives you something structured to work around.
yeah.
But you need to sit down those goals, because otherwise you just could be waffling.
Yeah, and these things can take time too. Like,
well, yeah, so
like
it's not
a lot
something
of
that's
people
going to happen
can
after
walk
one
in
session.
and think seeing a psychologist means you get
Yep.
a key, you get the golden ticket or some answers straight away.
Yeah.
How long does people usually spend coming to see you?
Well, you get 10 sessions typically per calendar year under the mental health care plan. However, 10 sessions for someone with quite complex needs is obviously rarely sufficient, but it at least provides you a platform and a starting point in both areas of developing rapport with someone and being able to at least provide some kind of strategies to work towards. And then those strategies can be used in one domain, and they can be also be used in someone else's domain in their life, e.g. Social domain, family domain, or a work environment, whatever it may be. So I think it's all dependent on, I guess, the individuals presenting problems. So sometimes they can be relatively minor. Typically, I see mostly people for maybe 4 to 5 sessions.
Yeah.
And they either have become satisfied enough of where they're at now that they fade away, or they no longer see the need to continue at the moment. And then I might see them again in 4 or 5 months' time. That's often the case. Is then I'll see them again in 4 months' time randomly. They'll pop up my calendar, and that's fine too. It's just a matter of, well, maybe I see them fortnightly or weekly to begin with to address some more more severe concerns, and then maybe it's reinforcement and just checking in every month or 2 after that, just to reinforce and to ensure we're not slipping back and regressing.
Something that I really want to touch on to get a better understanding for everyone is, through social media, I think it's become very blurred what anxiety or depression is.
Yeah.
It's almost glorified these days to have a mental health problem. Like it sounds fucking crazy, but it's the truth. And the only comparison I can make is, I remember when I was starting to talk about it, and I was with some friends, and one of the girls there said to one of her friends, same table, she said, I remember when I had anxiety last weekend at King Street. I couldn't even dance. I was that anxious, and I was like, oh shit, like that's not anxiety. And when people start saying that, and I will never tell someone, and I've made a point of this, I will never tell someone you don't have anxiety.
Yeah, because she still does have anxiety.
That's exactly right.
How severe it is, though, and to what context is different.
You can never identify it, and to every person, the worst thing that's happened to them is the worst. That's as bad as it gets, you know what I mean?
It's very subjective.
Well, I get it.
Yeah.
Anxiety or depression is a very, very serious thing. It's nothing that people... I really find if people are that open saying, oh, I've got anxiety, it's probably not...
people get anxious.
Yes.
But whether they have a diagnosable anxiety, then that's, I guess, another question, and that's something that needs to be assessed.
And I think
everybody gets anxious.
Self-diagnose.
Yeah. Well, being anxious is a natural...
It's a daily thing.
Evolutionary response to our environment, right? And it's sort of something that is required in some circumstances to be able to perform. However, the issue is that typically that's a physiological response. So that's sort of muscles turning on, central nervous system firing up, eyes dilating. It sort of puts you into a fight or flight response to be able to fight or flight. However, in this day and age, we don't need to run anywhere and we don't need to fight anything. So typically left in this fight or flight response, and your sort of body's sort of going into this mode, whereas it's something that has already passed, or we're the only creature that is able to elicit a fight or flight response without actually being a feed stimulus in front of us, because it's all coming from up here. It's not coming from out there. Often
it's capable of putting that thought process together.
Exactly. So we're the only ones that's able to sometimes think about the past and the future, and without being in the present sometimes, and that's what can be sometimes contributing to those kinds of thoughts. So yeah, you're going to get anxious, and you might be anxious about work tomorrow. You don't have to be at work to be anxious about it. And I guess that's what the biggest concern is because people are having difficulty managing that anxiety or ability to switch off.
That is probably the most important thing you said, Len. Have you heard of logotherapy?
No, I haven't.
Logotherapy I first heard of in a book called A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
He was a psychiatrist in the Nazi camps. And he starts trying to, and fuck, I hope I don't butcher this, but his thing is meaning orientation. And his thing in it is a man with a why can endure almost any how. And he encouraged other people throughout like the time that they're in the camps to find something worth living for. And if you could find something worth living for in the worst case of the world, like these people were in that camps, then once they were outside, or once they were past it, or they constantly having something to look forward to, that was what was saving people's lives. And logotherapy, for me, when I heard that, I went, shit, like that's something to attach yourself to.
Yeah. Well, I think that the way I really approach that often is, because I completely agree, is through a sort of values-based orientated a values-based, goal-orientated approach to therapy. So what that is that you're identifying the different values, the different core values that someone may have, e.g., honesty, respect, trust, fun, fitness, love. I don't care what it could be, anything, right? And they're the core values that people will elicit from a pool of different values, and they are able to select that sort of independently. And then they're the values that they're identifying with as being most important to them. And then they are the values that need to be their life. Often the case when someone is dealing with anxiety, depression, can often be the case that their life has sort of slipped out of alignment with their core values, right? So they may be in a harmful relationship, or they may be in a workplace that's really conflicting against their values, or maybe what they're doing each day has slipped away from their fun and fitness values and they're not exercising anymore, or they're not engaging in the sport they really like doing, or the hobby, whatever it may be. And often the hobby is something that falls in line with the core values. And then similar to what you're saying there, without living a life that's in line with those values, then you live a life that lacks purpose and meaning, right? So it's, on a short-term level, it's something to get you up out of the bed in the morning, and it's something to identify with as being, well, I see this as being purposeful and valuable for me. And I think that's really important to identify those values, because often you'll find that in a lot of harmful relationships or conflicting relationships, maybe those individuals don't share those kind of core values with you as much as what you may have believed. Or maybe it's not until you've identified what your values are that you're able to see that, well, clearly this person doesn't have any of the honesty or trust, because they're always lying to me, and no wonder that I can't trust them, and they're always intertwined.
I think what you just said is the one. It's more case. It's a personal thing, because it's really hard to look at someone and go, I don't really gel with you, without knowing what you gel with.
But that's all right too, and I guess and that's fine. And people aren't going to share the same values, and I don't think what people get caught up is putting their own expectations on other people, right? So, they should behave this way, or they should think this is important, or where are you getting that from? Like, that's only coming from your experiences, and that's only coming from what you believe in.
Yes.
Why should they believe any different? Why should they believe the same as you? Why should they believe a certain way? There's no shoulds. They just is, and the way that they want to, live their life. No, and the way that they want to live their life is completely fine. You're only laying your own expectations on them, and that's not affecting them. It's like drinking the poison and wanting the other person to die. It's only affecting them. It's not affecting you. This anger or resentment that you're feeling towards them is not affecting you. Sorry. It's not affecting this anger and resentment.
I knew what you were saying. Drinking the poison and wanting them to die.
Yeah, so this resentment and anger you're feeling is only affecting them. It's not affecting you. So I think that's what some people get really caught up in that sometimes, and I think that's really not very helpful.
Something that you definitely want to go over is like your expectations of social media and the impacts that's having on people's mental health.
Yeah, I think it's pretty profound now, because I think that people often get caught up in a bit of a whirlwind of sort of making unrealistic comparisons to other people's lifestyles. I think, particularly from my point of view, I feel like I always slipped into the sort of the pattern of making unrealistic comparisons to people's best 5% of their lifestyle. And for me, it was lifestyle. So it was seeing other people's lifestyle and their depiction of their lifestyle.
When you say lifestyle, do you mean?
So I mean like day-to-day activities, week-to-week activities, travel, what they're doing with their life and days. It may be insignificant events, but may also be significant, but it's also just around more sort of novel events as well, like simply just as being at the beach sometimes, or being overseas, or doing something adventurous, or whatever it may be. And you're looking at a depiction or a snapshot of someone's 5% of a very filtered version of what their life they want you to see. And that's a representation of how they feel at that particular very minute moment. And how they actually feel underlying to that may not be a true representation of how they actually feel.
Very, very rare.
Very rare.
How often do you meet someone and you go, "Oh, you're exactly like I thought you'd be"?
Yeah, not very often.
Fucking never, man.
And I think that then you get stuck in the trap of comparing your most sort of insufficient or depressive moments to their best. I think the best example for me was on Christmas Day. I made a note not to go on Instagram on Christmas Day. I had the best Christmas, man, because all Christmases before that, all you're doing is looking at these happy families and happy times, and everyone's doing everything, and you're sitting there with your family, like 5 people or 10 people, whatever it may look like, and you're like, oh, this is shit. And then all of a sudden, like, Christmases for 90% of those people did not look like it looked like on their Instagram. And the depiction of how they actually felt, what they're trying to sort of appeal, is that how they actually felt? Then I don't really know, and it's not even worth thinking about.
It's the 2 seconds they had the camera out.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a much better Christmas this Christmas, just not being on social media. I'll make sure I don't do that again.
And I think, so you're off it now.
Yeah, Well, I go on the weekends, and for me it was checking it at work, right? So that was where I really noticed it. It was because I'd be at work, and then like on my lunch break, because I can't use my phone at work. But then on lunch break, I'd go on, and all I'm seeing is, see, like 90% of people are actually at work, but like no one's putting up photos at work. Like no one's putting a photo up in their office. So like, and I guess that's the whole point. Is the way it affects me is not how it's going to affect Joe over there. Like, and that's fine. Like, it may affect me in a different way. Maybe that's my own inability to cope or my own lack of ability to be able to respond to that situation appropriately and not allow other people's lives to influence mine. But I've just made an active decision that it was not helpful for me. So, like, I'm quite... What does it provide me at work? Nothing. It's a distraction. So for me, it was like, well, I'm not losing anything there. I'll read the paper or I'll read the sport. I don't really care. But, like... It's not good. And then, on the weekends and stuff, I will do that. But like, I'm not. It's not affecting me in a negatively way there.
And have you found it's much more beneficial? You're a lot happier.
Yeah, because I'm not worrying what other people are doing. I don't care what other people are doing. I've got my inner circles and the people I'm connected with, and I'm connected with them because I want to be connected with them, and I'm connected with them on a regular basis. And Instagram was a whole shit fight of people that someone didn't even know. Why am I looking at this person's life all the time? I don't even know this person. They wouldn't even speak to me when I'm out. So what's the point of this? So I could just cull everyone and I'd have no one left. But it would be better if I just don't go on it.
See, I've spoken to people too who have been like, unfollow everyone that you don't talk to. And it's like, well, then you're limiting what your possibilities are.
Yeah.
I think you've definitely had the right approach to it by doing that.
And hey, like, I still like it, don't get me wrong, but like, it's just not for me during the week.
The podcast by that Steve Bartlett, who I was just talking about, he talks about you're your happiest when you are closest to being your truest self. And for me, that's what this is. This can be the biggest failure in the world, and I've been more happy in the last 3 months than I've been in my entire life. Whether 1 million people watch this or 2 people, I'm fucking happy doing it. I'm happy doing it, and I know it's a good thing, and it's intrinsic, I think is the word.
Yeah.
It's what I want to do because I'm happy doing it.
I think the key is your expectations around that as well. So I think that happiness in someone's life is reality minus expectations. So you're just living in the present moment. You don't have any expectations about how things should be, or how things ought to be, or how other people are influencing you to feel how they should be. It just is.
I shared this picture 2 days ago, and this is the story I was talking about. I shared a picture 2 days ago on my Instagram, and it was an "Are you okay?" picture. And the picture was just a dude in a hard hat on a work site, and it said, men are 6 times more likely to commit suicide than they are to die on a mine site, or to die on a construction site. Yeah. And a friend messaged me, and he said, 2 days ago, I walked out of work with a dude at 2 a.m. at the end of our shift, and half an hour later he killed himself. And that put tears in my eyes, man. It is insane how close that is to everybody's doorstep daily. And that's why I think this, and getting a better understanding of what it is, like I value you as a person so much for doing, like, not just what you're doing as a job, but what you're doing and the way you approach a situation, because you can't do enough or talk enough. I think a lot of people are over people beating the drum on mental health, and like it does get a bit like that. You're like, fucking relax. But to that one person who's like, to the one person that goes, fuck, I need to talk to that dude. Yeah. That's why I'm doing this now, because I want to talk to everyone, and I'm going to go and do like the Lifeline Assist course and all these sorts of things, because you can't do enough for that, man.
No.
And to know that, like, I said a message to my mate, and I said, how are you?
Because ask him how he's going. Yeah, he's very close to that.
That's fucking insane.
And I think those little gestures mean a lot to people who are feeling like that.
They do,
and they rarely come back here in a negative way. It's really rare that you're going to have a negative outcome from that kind of putting yourself out there on the line.
No.
And it's done no harm. It could make the world of a difference to someone else, and it's taken 1 second out of your day.
It's done
Just
no
do
harm.
it.
And what I want to see more people do is support people doing what you're doing, or support the conversation and that sort of stuff, because I definitely have friends, and you've definitely got friends, that if you said like, fuck, I need to talk, and you said that in a social setting, you can get a weird response.
Yep.
And there needs to be more support for these conversations, for anything that is pro mental health, because not until you are sitting there and you contemplating suicide, or are depressed, or actually incapacitated by your feelings, do you go, holy fuck, man, like the importance of checking on everyone and checking on, but just that's what I'm doing now, beating the drum as loud as I can every fucking day.
Yeah,
Because
and I think it brings back to what you said, is like, sometimes you'll never know the difference, but you're not going into that interaction wanting something out of them. You're going into that interaction purely to provide them with something. So it really, sometimes you never know the difference it's made. And having those expectations about you getting something out of it is not the way to go about it. You're purely trying to make input and support them in some way.
And that's what I'm doing with this, and like with the site and that sort of stuff. I'm trying to get people to understand that your mental health is not just what goes on in your head. It's the job you hate that you're turning up to every day for fucking 4 years. It's the friends who you can't separate yourself from because you know it's negative. It's eating shit food constantly.
Yep.
There is so many factors that are part of your mental health that people go, what's that got to do with that?
Yeah.
If you don't eat good food, sleep well, and exercise, you're not giving yourself a fighting chance to do anything positive with your mental health.
I agree. Sometimes I feel like a dead horse sometimes talking to people about their sleep and their food and their exercise that they need to engage in routinely. And sometimes I question why some people just lose track of how important that is. And I think that it can never be underestimated, the impact that can have on someone's mental health.
And that is exactly why...
That's right, that's my phone.
Hey, you're fine. That's exactly why I'm trying to get people to better understand what you do, because you aren't sitting there and going, here you go, here's your thing.
No.
Your whole purpose is to offer an alternative.
Yeah, exactly. And in saying that, I often work with clients that I believe that psychotropic medication is required, and that is often the best case worked in collaboration with a therapeutic framework with myself. It all depends on the individual's presenting concerns and what their current case is, really.
Yeah, completely agree. If anyone's heard things in this podcast or this talk, and they've started to identify things in themselves that they may be thinking need some more attention, sites like Lifeline or the Black Dog Institute,
Beyond Blue.
Are You Okay? Beyond Blue. There's a lot of stuff out there, and the SK10.
The K10 and the
K10.
DAS21 are just psychometric
DAS21.
tests that you can find online that the doctors will use anyway. But don't draw any two conclusions from those. See the doctor as well.
Yeah, absolutely see a doctor. And I'm trying to... I really want everyone to get a better understanding of what their mental health is. If you need to start researching your gut health, look at the way that's affecting your whole body's your whole body's health and your mental health. If you need to have proper sleep, you need to have proper nutrition, and you need to have an idea of what mental health means as a whole, because talking to a life coach or a psychologist or even a psychiatrist, if you don't have a friendly neighborhood psychologist floating around to have a chat with, finding the right person to talk to in a positive mental state, or at least not in a severely impaired mental state, can be the best thing you'll ever do for yourself, because everyone can be better. Everyone's mental health can be better, and the more attention you pay to where your time and energy and your mental health is, the better chance you have at not only helping yourself, but identifying the problems in the people around you and caring for your friends and family. And the better we can all start talking and having these conversations, and the easier it gets for everyone to start reaching out. And I think that's what the most important thing is, that people feel comfortable having the conversation, because you're not always going to get everything you need in the first conversation. And I encourage everyone to talk to as many people as they can and expect nothing, because not everyone has the same answer and not everyone needs the same answer. But the more time you spend trying to figure out what you need and not what the world around you needs, the better off you're going to be. Big Dave, thank you.